The main character of the manga was very tired and her whole body ached, and she was falling apart as she walked because of the work she was doing on the field. She really wanted it to be the last time, but suddenly a man told her to shut up and stop talking like a very ancient old woman because she was still quite young. She decided to apologize to him and explained that she was probably acting like this because she had lived with her grandmother for too long and deep down she wanted to just shut this imposter up. She was very happy that the work was supposedly over and she could go home and turned around and left. Of course, the man began to talk to himself about how she thought that since she had finished her simple job, she could leave, but he knew that he should not have taken this stranger in so cordially. And the girl, in turn, heard all this behind her back and wanted nothing more than for him to shut up. She began to recall that 7 years had passed since she had come here, and it was really very difficult for her to adapt to the plain climate because she had been burned all over back then. She continued that she used to live in a village in the north, and in this barren land, the snowstorm only stopped in the summer, and it was there on the day that the peak moment in her life occurred. She was much smaller because she was only 13 years old, and at that moment she was wrapped up all over because it was winter and cold, and it was very difficult for her to find any food. But if she did not find anything, her grandmother would be upset, and she definitely did not want that. She went on to say that her parents had died in an avalanche, and that this happened very often in her home country because the village was surrounded by an impassable mountain range, and so her grandmother raised her alone, but she had fallen very seriously ill in the middle of winter, and this was another challenge in her life. Her knees were aching extremely badly, and she had nothing to eat because she saw only snow around her and thought that maybe she could just chew it. But it was definitely not a good idea, but still it was a desperate situation, and she was going through every thought in her head. Suddenly, in the midst of this white snow, she noticed a golden circle approaching in the distance and decided to rush to it, because she could not believe her eyes and even for a moment thought that she was dreaming and that she was just imagining it. She ran much closer to that object and suddenly began to blame herself for something, as if she had done something terrible, and it turned out that she had seen for the first time that day an incredibly handsome guy, because he looked like a sculpture and was completely naked in the middle of this frost and snow. She couldn't wrap her head around how he could be looking like that because he could actually die of cold, and she thought he was handsome though. But she thought he was a complete psycho, and it was certainly very strange. Suddenly, the guy noticed that the girl had bitten the thing she had decided to get, and he was clearly in a bad mood when he saw this. At first the girl said that she hadn't touched anything, but there were crumbs on her lips, and it was quite clear that she had eaten it, and he was very angry with her. He grabbed her by the scruff of the neck and started accusing her of having given his so-called essence to a human, and she was very scared and started to apologize to him. But it didn't help because he was still angry with her because she had made a huge mistake even though she didn't know what was coming. As soon as she left it alone for a while, the whole situation just went wrong, and he continued to yell at her and said that he would just eat her heart right now. She did not understand what he wanted from her and whether he was really serious, but he certainly did not look like a person who jokes, and it turns out that the essence is completely absorbed into the human heart in 10 years, and while he will cut off her hands and feet and hang her from a tree so that she does not escape, he decided to act. Of course, he decided to start with the arms and grabbed her, but she started screaming and pulling away and really wanted God to help her this time and send this psycho to hell, and she was really scared because she definitely didn't want to die like this right now. Suddenly, something happened and the guy fell to the ground and he let her go, and she was very surprised that she had succeeded and that God had heard her. But the guy realized that he had no time and nothing to do, so he grabbed the essence and just finished it. And after that he turned into a yellow dragon with huge wings so that the girl was speechless and could not say anything, because for her this sight was something out of fantasy. He told her after this transformation that she was lucky and fortunate as a human being because he would not kill her right now. But in 10 years he would take his essence back and tear off her arms and legs and then swallow her heart, And with these words, they ended their meeting. He also promised her that he would find her even in the next world, so she might not even try to hide, and so it was all very seriously possible. But the girl had already grown up and thought about the situation that happened then. She seemed to be frozen, and a girl approached her and asked her what she was thinking about, because it was impossible to shout to her, but she said that everything was fine and it was not that important. Now she believed that this story was in the past and no one knew, but maybe she was so hungry then that she just started hallucinating. So she didn't pay much attention and didn't think it was very serious and dangerous for her. A girl approached her and said that she had overheard the soldiers talking, and it turned out that some important person was coming to them, and they were all very surprised. Why exactly here, and what will happen to them? It seemed that a long time ago something was stolen from him, and he said that he waited 10 years to get back what he lost. And at these words the girl was thinking, because she remembered that situation from her childhood, and it seems that there is some northern man who hid this thing and then fled to the plains, and now she really remembered his name. She had that situation in her mind, and she remembered his words at the moment when he turned into a yellow dragon, and told her to remember his name for the rest of her life, and it really came true, and she started screaming incredibly because she didn't know what was going to happen to her, and she couldn't believe her ears. She couldn't calm down, and when she stayed, she thought about the fact that that psychotic dragon had gotten here, and she was all tight inside, and you could see that she was really worried. She felt really bad that the girl had asked if she was okay, but she knew that she had to do something about it. She grabbed her friend by the shoulders and demanded some dye from her, because she could use it for her hair. Because her plan was to dye her hair so that she would not be recognized, and she had only one color left, and it was a little bit maybe not as suitable for her hair as she wanted, but the girl did not care and just wanted it right now. The girls both decided to leave, and she was already thinking about the fact that she had skin as white as snow and black hair and cornflower eyes, and that this was a typical appearance for northern people. And that was probably how the man remembered her, so she just had to change her appearance. The girl found some paint for her, and they decided to start the process of her transformation, and she bent down and started washing her hair, and in a few hours she became a completely different person. It turned out that now she looked like a small tree because her hair was so green like a swamp, and she was definitely not happy about it because she did not expect that her friend had only green left, and she thought that this was definitely not good for her. But she still tried to stay positive because now no one would recognize her as a northerner, and everything was fine and everything would be fine, and now she could not worry so much about her future death. When she was already dressed as a servant, a man looked at her very strangely and asked her what was wrong with her hair, because it looked like it was covered with moss, and she should have dressed much better on such an important day, but she did not pay attention to it because her main goal was to not be recognized by the man. Finally, the man arrived, and all the maids were ordered to get ready and take their places, because this was a very important person for everyone, and they had to make this meeting perfect and the reception so that everything went without a single problem. To greet this man, they had to stand on the sides and throw flowers right under his feet and tell him that he was incredible and beautiful and could go on as soon as possible. But the only problem was that the girl was one in the line and he could notice her very easily. She still reassured herself that he couldn't kill her in the middle of the carpet in front of everyone, because it was very stupid and horrible of him, and he could lose all the power and status he had, so she decided not to worry about it, and she knew that he would never recognize her. Finally, he entered the mansion, and the maids were shouted at by a man not to make a sound or a movement that was not necessary, for if they did, they would all be punished. And finally he entered the mansion, and he shone like the sun, and he was as beautiful as he had been when they had first met in that snowy forest. But still, in that same moment of admiration, she remembered his terrible words that in 10 years he would eat her heart, and it confused her, and perhaps she could have given herself away through these emotions that she thought at every moment and every second that he recognized her. But when he came up to her and looked her in the eye, he said that if she threw even one petal of the flowers at him, he would tear off her hands, and ordered all the others to put it out of his sight. And it was clear that he was really in a bad mood, and he did not want such fame and honor from the servants. At the moment he passed her, the girl breathed a sigh of relief, because she really thought at that moment that she was going to die, but the other servants were discussing him, that his character was just terrible. But his appearance was really just perfect, and you could be knocked down by his beauty, but our protagonist herself fell for a completely different reason. She was very happy that it was finally over, and the man started yelling at them not to stand around because the guest had to be served, and the girl really didn't like it, because she didn't want to see him anymore, because she couldn't behave normally in his presence. The girls were standing exactly opposite our master, and they heard a conversation between him and another man who asked him about the purpose of his visit, but the boy then looked at him and said that he wanted the person who had taken his property and fled, and when he found him he would tear him to pieces. Of course, he was not yet sure that this person was in the area, but he asked if all the villagers were here at the moment, and it was true that they were, except for those who were running errands at the moment. It was necessary to call everyone here immediately, or perhaps the owner could describe in detail the person who committed such a crime, but he said that he should not have worried about it because he could have captured his prey and dealt with it himself. The girl listened to all this and just trembled with the horror that was overwhelming and surrounding her, and she could not realize that they were talking about her right now, and she heard words about how could one dare to rob him, because that man had lost all fear. But she had enough anxiety because she already had many enemies who wanted to kill her. In the end, the master was asked to stay here while he was busy searching, and everyone was sure that he would quickly accomplish his main goal. But now he was offered lunch. The girl tried to keep calming herself down because she thought he wouldn't recognize her, but if he stayed here for a long time, things could turn out very differently, and she couldn't be sure that everything would be okay in the future. And after the meal, he had the opportunity to see the entire estate in detail, and our girl continued to walk around him, and of course, she had a displeased face and served him food and watched him eat, and it was very annoying for her. However, the boy noticed the girl's unfriendly look and expression and decided to ask her directly why she was staring at him like that while he was eating. The girl realized that she had given herself away and was very scared, and she just decided to quickly explain that no one had visited them for a long time, and that such a guest really confused her and excited her very much. But she was not only very curious, but she was literally following him, and he wanted to get some explanation from her, but she didn't know what else to say to him, because he didn't believe her and stood in front of her and waited for her to answer. She just looked at him and kept silent, but he was standing in front of her and waiting for her to say something, and he was really unhappy. But she needed to come up with some excuse on her side, and even if it was stupid, it could save her at that moment and make him stop looking at her at all. She thought to herself that he was extremely gorgeous, and she almost fell over when she saw him, because he was such a beautiful person and looked like a sculpture and a work of art, and she decided to tell him that she had accidentally fallen in love with him. She had this love at first sight, and that explained everything. And deep inside, she just couldn't believe that she had actually said it out loud, and she was very ashamed, and she felt really terrible. She continued to tell him directly to his eyes that she loved him, and deep inside, she could not understand why this thought had come out of her heart, and she needed to fix it as soon as possible, but she hoped that she would not have to use her power at that moment. She continued to tell him that she got up early and could wash herself in cold water, and her hair didn't fall out, and she didn't have to look after her parents, and she didn't have children, and she was still single, and she was also very good at making snowmen and eating anything and running very fast, and the list was probably endless, and she was just spilling out all her emotions, and the words were pouring out in a kind of stream that she realized she was backing herself into a corner. Finally, she added that she was a great massage therapist, and this thought surprised him very much, or in this case he thought that maybe she was expecting him to ask her to marry him. But this thought definitely confused her and made her extremely terrified. because she definitely did not want that and really hoped that he was just joking. But if she said no after such a confession on her part, it would raise some suspicions and incomprehensions, and the master thought that this girl was really crazy and ordered her to be killed, but that was really not an option, and she really confessed that she wanted to marry him very much and sincerely. Of course, it was not very harmful for her to dream, and the guy just laughed at the situation and turned around and left her, and the girl was very happy that she had gotten away with it, and was able to get out of the situation and get away with it. She saw the other maids laughing at her, but she did not care, and the mistress said that he wanted to rest, and they had already prepared a bedroom for him, and had prepared that room in great detail, and decided to call the best hearing for him, and even he could choose who he liked. But he didn't like any of them, and he decided to choose our protagonist, which scared the girl incredibly, because she definitely didn't expect such a turn, and he also called her a caterpillar, probably because of her green hair color. Then this man thinks alone that finally his last transformation has come, because every 100 years dragons change their image, and this happens 6 times, and only on the last time the dragon becomes an adult. He was a golden dragon, and he was the most famous personality of all, because it was said that once a golden dragon fell in love with a goddess, and she carried him to heaven, and he was too busy loving himself, so he did not understand why he needed anyone else. How the golden dragon could have done such a stupid thing he did not understand, and while he was thinking about it, his subordinate was looking at him, and he did not like it, and it was a black dragon, so he reprimanded him. But he said that he just wanted to make sure that he had completed his transformation safely. He was the only one who could care about such things, but it so happened that this gentleman had done too many unnecessary things and failed, and on the 5th time he did not take the essence and slept for 10 years, and that he once founded a country in the world of men, and then left it to its fate, and then, foolishly, he accepted flowers from a dragoness and almost got himself married. Our host thought that the black dragon was exaggerating, and of course he was not the one who had to solve all these problems, so he behaved so calmly, and then we could only agree with him and meet at this place in 10 years. Finally, when the black dragon left the company of our hero, he was glad that the boar had finally left, and he could be alone and absorb the essence he was holding in his hand. But then he remembered that he needed the holy stone to do this, so he decided to leave it in the snow for now and then come back later and do what he was going to do. And that's the moment when that little girl noticed the thing and wanted to eat it, because she was incredibly hungry at that moment, and it turned out that this essence in it had the magical power of that dragon, and that was the key to existence and the source of some power for him. A dragon that loses the essence is no different than a normal lizard, so it was valued as the apple of the eye, and it can only be shared with someone that the dragon recognizes as his destiny in the future. And when he saw that some little girl took that thing and just ate half of it, of course he was extremely angry and furious that he didn't know how to handle himself. When she bit his essence, of course, he became angry with her, and all this talk about fate was incredible nonsense to him. And he was not going to share his essence with anyone, so he did not understand how that girl dared to do that to him and steal it, and he was not going to forgive her. Now they were grown up in real time and standing face to face, and the boy could see how nervous the girl was, and of course, deep down she agreed with it, because she didn't like to help or serve guests in any way, and now that she had to buy him, she could see him naked again, and it brought her joy on the one hand and shock and horror on the other. She had to wash him herself, and she did not know at what point he would decide to bathe in her blood, so she imagined in her mind that this bloody bath was prepared especially for her, and her imagination had no boundaries or limits. The guy knew perfectly well that the girl was crazy about him, but he still ordered her to pull herself together and perform her direct duties until she was fired, and the girl was very surprised and did not understand this position at this point, because how could she be fired for such a thing, and so she decided that maybe it was time to run away. She continued to be indebted to him and decided to give him an unforgettable bath. That is, in this way she had a certain idea in her mind, which she thought was very beneficial for her, and she liked it. When the girl saw the man naked again, she was very much in awe of his physique and could not understand how the human body could be so beautiful. And although he was not human at all, she had an overwhelming desire to touch his body with her own hands, and that is what she wanted to do, and she reached out to him, for she could not look away. But at the same time, at that very moment, she knew that she could not and should not do so, for now she had to concentrate on liberating him and regaining his consciousness, for if she brushed him so unscrupulously, he might become angry, but if she overdid it, she might leave not only this mansion but also this world. Therefore she knew that she had to be very careful in this matter, and when she touched his body with the brush, she thought that he did not like it at all, and that he should say so directly to her, and that he should throw her out and call for another maid, but it was not as she had intended. He looked at her rather indifferently, and she did not understand why he was behaving like that, and so she dropped the brush down and apologized for what she had done and promised that she would get a new one and continue her work. But the boy did not understand why she was so tense and extremely worried because it was inappropriate. She was acting as if she had never seen a man in her life, and she was very surprised that he noticed her strange behavior. But she didn't think she was shaking because she was just moving the brush very slowly so as not to make him angry, and he thought she was a coward. Then he ordered her to wash his hair, and she agreed to do it, and then he told her to call him by his name, and at that moment her heart broke because she remembered again the events that happened in the past, and that could lead to her death immediately. At first she really wanted to make him drive her out of his sight, but he was not easily moved, and she was very afraid that she would die if she did not do her job well, so she had better try to do her job as well as she could. She decided that although he scared her, when she washed his hair, he had his eyes closed, and she couldn't take her eyes off him because he was incredibly beautiful, and at the same time she tried to keep those thoughts away from herself because she realized that it gave her away, the way she was staring at him all the time, and it was very strange. She fully understood that she had to finish her work, and she could finally escape from this hell that surrounded her. But when she told him that she had done all this, she noticed that he did not open his eyes and did not get up, and she was very surprised about this because she thought that maybe he wanted her to continue this process and thought that she should start maybe all over again. She started to get tense and didn't want him to get up and stop lying down, and even decided to touch his pulse to see if he was breathing. But if she woke him up, he could kill her. And so she was hesitant about what she should do in this situation. Suddenly he came out of the bathroom and jumped in front of her naked, and she said she had finished with his hair, and he approved of the situation, but it was not clear why he had such a scared face. She decided to help him dry himself, and at that moment she started blushing and tried to calm herself down deep inside because he was actually a dragon and he promised to kill her, and so she shouldn't have been so fond of him and fallen in love with him. The protagonist was in his room looking out the window and noticed that the night sky was especially beautiful tonight, and even heard herself wanting to go home and started crying because she was overwhelmed by incredible memories and nostalgia that she could not contain her emotions. When the boy looked at her, he was very surprised what was happening, but she covered her eyes with her hands and thought that her bedtime was being delayed more and more, and she had to follow his orders, and all this was happening because of that fierce day, and it was causing her even more pain. Suddenly, the man told her to give him a massage, and she set to work and saw him getting high in the process and smiled because she thought he looked like a child and might even hit his head now from relaxing so deeply. In fact, the girl liked him much better when he was sleeping and thought he was cute, so she didn't want to wake him up and decided to rest herself because she might not have another chance. Then she decided to call him and wake him up, and when he woke up, he was very scared and asked how long he had slept, and she said that he had slept for 2 hours, and that he was actually surprised that he could pass out so suddenly. If only the girl knew, but she was told that she was very good at massage, although now he makes her do it every day until she falls asleep, and that was her mistake, but there was really nothing wrong with the massage itself, but he went to bed too late. It was between midnight and 1 a.m., and of course it caused her some discomfort in her daily routine. She would understand if he was working late or having fun with someone, but this person had no friends at all, and he just didn't want to go to bed early, and that was not clear to her. Besides, she was very tired during the day, and when he would lie down in his soft bed and tell her to start massaging, it would make her angry and her eyes would burn with fire, and she would think about him and want to just finish him off and knock him out with her fist, no matter how handsome he was, but everything had its limits. And yesterday he even asked her if she liked being with him that much, because he saw how red she blushed in his presence, but she regretted once again that she had tasted his essence and did not understand what he was talking about, but she forced herself to calm down because she could not give away her true self. She apologized to him and really maintained the legend that she liked him very much, and it was very difficult for her to play this role. But she turned on this actress and continued this line for her salvation in the future. The girl recalled last night how a guy was washing again at her house, and when she met him, she told him her complaint that he came to her every day and that he had not yet repaired the pipes in his house and went to her house as if it were his home. He naturally felt ashamed of this, but made excuses for talking about the problem. But it was still to no avail, and she was very hopeful that he would repair it before the well dried up. But it could not go on like this. She asked him why he was bathing now, since he had been working late, but he replied that he had been waiting for her, and she was surprised and looked at him in confusion. He told her that the guy she was serving, he was very worried about it and asked if he was forcing her to do something forbidden. Namely, he was really worried about the fact that she was almost never home, and several times he almost fell asleep while waiting for her, and it was very worrying for him. He told her that if he was forcing her to do something unpleasant for her, he could try to help her in this situation and save her somehow. But she was really surprised to hear him say that, and she was very surprised and did not know what to say to him. She told him that she was very grateful to him for his concern and support, but she said very firmly that she was fine and her family was not in danger, and she was not in any danger, and then he just apologized for his thoughts and said that he was just asking, and now he should go to rest. On this pleasant note, they said goodbye to each other, and the girl was left alone with the thoughts that this guy was really kind and so naive, and if the owner was just a little bit like him, it would be very good, and she would not feel so devastated. She recalled a situation when she even fell asleep standing up, and all because she could not sleep because of this whole situation, and he almost constantly made her give him massages at night, and it was until midnight and her arms were really falling off, but she could not refuse him because she had no right and no choice. Sometimes she felt as if she was touching a snake, and this was quite justified because she knew that it was not a man at all, but a dragon, and he was extremely cold. But his skin was snow white, and it was immediately obvious that he did not pull or carry any heavy things, although he looked very strong and stately. Suddenly she found herself looking at him very closely, and she didn't like it because she had been feeling very strange lately about touching him, and she had to be really careful because she might fall asleep again and her neck might be wrenched, and that couldn't happen, and she was really worried and scared. By the way, usually by this point he is already falling into oblivion, but now he was staring at her and it was really stressing her out, and she did not want to admit the idea that she would have to give him maybe a massage until midnight, but he told her to do it again and again, and she had to touch him with her hands and told her to do it wherever she wanted. Suddenly, he took her palm and put it to his face, and she told him that she did not know how to massage her face, and he said he asked why her hands were so warm, but it turns out that her hands were actually cold. It was not unpleasant to touch him, and she did not know what to do, but he ordered her to touch him again, and she realized that this was beyond the usual massage, and besides that she had a picture on her face that he would kill her after one touch, and his face and mouth seemed to exist separately in her mind. Then finally they stopped doing it, and if he even gave her a chance, it would not end well, and he actually liked what was happening now and started to act more decisively. In her mind, she thought it would be okay to sleep here, but she couldn't understand why he could be so attractive, even if he was holding her like that and her heart was beating out of her chest. And of course she didn't hate him, but she was in a good mood and she felt very comfortable in his arms because she felt like she was one with him. He told her not to misunderstand him, but when her body would be pleasant, but love is different and nothing good would come from any expectations on her part. But she still did not really understand his thing and continued to embrace him, and they felt each other very, very well at that moment. After that, nothing like that happened, and the massage continued. That is, in other words, even the blood was pouring out of her tiredness, and at any time she just fell down and slept, and even this happened during meals, but nevertheless she felt that she was really dying. She was sitting in front of him again and starting this massage, but she was already tired, and now that she had done her process, she saw that he had fallen asleep and finally she could sleep, but he suddenly grabbed her hand and did not let go. She was very frightened because she wanted to go home and her eyes were closing, but she had no choice but to lie down beside him and fall into a sound and peaceful sleep. Sometimes she feels disappointed. For example, her body is fresher in the morning and the sunshine and the house was much warmer, and she realized that she had overslept and just lost track of time in this freshness, and now the situation was becoming more serious. 1. It was not only a strange room, but first of all he had his arms around her body, and she could not get out of his arms and did not know what to do because she had been sleeping from evening until morning like that, and she had to finally get out of here before anyone noticed them. This could not be allowed, and she could only pretend to be asleep, but at that moment his subordinate came in to report some information from the elders and saw this sight of him sleeping with the maidservants. The master himself also woke up and realized that he had been sleeping with this girl, and he was shocked, but he was visibly very angry and ordered her to get out of his bed immediately. For dragons, sharing the essence with someone is the same as taking an oath of loyalty, and at the same time, when a dragon shares it, its soul and body become very unstable, so there were only 2 ways to overcome this period. 1 was to become one with his partner, and 2 to touch him, and for the master these options were impossible, because he was always in an unstable state, and the most frequent sign of this was insomnia. So of course his rapid awakening became understandable, and he began to wake the girl up as well, so that she would get up quickly, and she realized at that moment that everything was lost, and now she could really die. No matter how much he liked her, he did not allow her to sleep in the same bed with him, and this was unacceptable to him, and now the girl was crawling under his feet and apologizing because she did not want this result and did not want to sleep with him anyway. She thought that under normal circumstances he would never get angry, but the way they were seen, it was quite understandable that he behaved this way, and now she did not know how to get out of it. But this was just a guess, and his subordinate still had some important business to attend to with his master and wanted to tell him some important information, but he was busy. When he pointed out that it was about his condition, he began to pay some important attention to it, and the subordinate reported to him that the dragon elders were very concerned about his condition and that something had to be done to find a way out of the situation. The elders appeared to have prepared gifts for him, and he suggested that he send him a letter in return, for there was something else important to do, and he really did not care about it, for he wanted to deal with the girl more. He was very curious about what happened to her, and he couldn't help but worry about it, so he left her because she was very good at massage, and really the problem was not with her, but with that northern child because he had to go through a lot because of her. He thought later that he had done something very shameful, but he did not understand why she was so worried about the massage, because tonight there was still the possibility of sleeping for 1 hour, and the greatest happiness was that she could look at him at all. Then the owner was told that the count had sent him a horse, but it was bred in another city, and it was said that the man had only 3 such creatures, and that it was a very important indicator in his life. All these conversations were very annoying for the master, and he could not stand the noise that surrounded him, so much so that he thought of breaking his neck. Later, he was offered a walk around the village and a look around the area, which he liked very much because thanks to the girl, there was no trace of insomnia lately, so he could finally go for a walk in a good mood, and then the man could finally shut his mouth. Suddenly, he noticed the girl working in the field and was very surprised because he really thought she was resting while he was not visiting. But it turns out that she was working very hard like an ox, and he saw how she was suffering and could not bear the thought that she was spending every day like that. You can really see how the girl suffers from this work, and it really hurt the boy's heart to see it, and he thought that this was another side effect after losing the essence of him. Suddenly, the girl was very hurt because she dropped all the crops she was harvesting, and the boy immediately rushed to her and ran up to protect her and covered her with his jacket, which surprised everyone around her, including the heroine herself. Why were they standing in front of each other? And he began to make claims to her that she had been touching him with her dirty hands all this time, and the girl began to make excuses that this was not the case at all, and she always washes them properly. Then he told her that most people who loved him were wrong, and he really hoped that she would be special in his eyes, and in fact they were all the same, and just because he would keep her around, she should not overestimate her status by thinking that she had a lot of free time. The girl agreed with him completely, and he told her to go in and wash immediately and not to come into the bedroom until he called her, and this all surprised the girl, and he still did not want to see her, and he thought that he did not want to see her crying. He told her to pray so that his anger would cool down a bit, and she really bit her hands at that moment and realized that it was some kind of generosity on his part, and she really could not believe her ears that there would be no more prayer, and he would do nothing near the temple, so finally she could just sleep. Then the events take place 4 days later, and the master himself and his subordinate are discussing a certain matter that made no sense. No matter how formal the letter was, it could not begin with quarreling and insulting. It had been 4 days since the green-haired girl had been in his bedroom, and the master himself was out of sorts, and it was evident that he was suffering from it, although he had ordered it. Yet she was in love with him, and so she acted very quietly, and yet she had to come to him without holding back her heart's call, and he expected her to crawl to him on her knees, but she might have begun to hate him, and he thought that was why she could not come. In the end, he felt that forbidding her to see him was too harsh on his part, and that the whole world might disappear because of it, and he decided to soften his order and really cared about her and was worried about her. The master's subordinate noticed the fact that since the man was so worried about the girl, he must have liked her very much, but he dismissed this fact because he did not really like her, but he enjoyed the way she massaged him and how it soothed and relaxed him. Besides, he would be the head of the middle world, and it would be good to appear and be merciful in the eyes of other people, so he ordered that caterpillar to be brought to him immediately, and thus it was a mercy on his part. In fact, he was a personality who had incredible power, and he was the one who was ruthlessly pressuring others, and then suddenly he showed mercy, which was very strange on his part, and all because he had lost his essence 10 years ago. If this is the reason, then he needs to find the northern man who was accused of stealing as soon as possible to resolve this whole situation and find a way out of it. Then another servant comes up to the girl and says that the master is calling her, and the girl was eating at the time and opened her mouth, which really surprised her, and she did not expect such a turn at that moment. But she realized that she should at least clean herself up a little bit, and in fact she had just finished working, and that's why she looked so terrible. But she had to wash herself immediately and then change into clean clothes and go up to the second floor, because that was the master's room. The girl really didn't want to do all this because she hadn't been there for a few days, and not even one episode of the manga had passed that it was terrifying her, or she didn't understand why he was calling her and really had absolutely no desire to see him. But in the end, since she had no other choice, she quickly cleaned herself up, and her appearance literally came closer, and she stood before the master and smiled very sincerely in his face and asked him what he wanted from her. Of course, she was just thinking what else she could do, and in fact the master was very pleased to hear her say that, and today he allowed her to come to him, and she pretended to be very grateful and happy, and in the future he said that as soon as he opened his eyes in the morning she should be with him. She was sitting on his lap and couldn't understand why he was asking her to do this, and then he explained that he had gone for a walk, and he really liked the scenery around him, and thought he would go again while it was still sunny. The girl thought to herself that he was saying this because he wanted her to accompany him on his walk, but she said that before he left, she wanted to tell him that if he needed her help, he could call her and she would come running at any time. The boyfriend did not like this, that he still had to wait for her to come, and then the girl got scared and said that she needed to be in his room every morning at 7 a.m. instead, and that was her new duty. But compared to what she had to do before, it was still much easier for her, and yet she would have to spend the whole day with this crazy creature, and it couldn't be worse than that. She almost cried. Suddenly, the master fell asleep while she was sitting on his lap just like that. And it surprised her a lot, so she was starting to feel and get used to it. It has been a week since her workplace became his bedroom instead of the field, and now her life is much more comfortable for her. He had insisted that she no longer had to serve other people. All she had to do was massage the master, and in fact she regretted confessing her love to him once, and it annoyed her sometimes, but the best part was that she could eat well 3 times a day. But the fact that she felt comfortable with a dragon who wanted to kill her was quite ironic, and she forgot for a moment that happiness does not last long, and that unhappiness always comes very suddenly. While they were walking, a girl ran up to the master and fell at his feet and said that she had not thought that the mud would fly in his direction, and the girl was standing behind him, and was very afraid of what the whole situation would lead to. She still realized that she needed to turn on her project to reduce the master's anger, and step 1 was to approve of him, and she told him that his beauty was dazzling, even though he had covered himself in mud, and that was her mistake because she could see that he was still angry. And step 2 was that he had to be taken somewhere, and suggested that he wash himself finally because his delicate skin could get hurt, and that was also a mistake, and the girl became incredibly scared of what he would do to her now. He rushed to her, and she decided to act differently and just beg him for mercy because he should be merciful to people as he had promised earlier, and said that her house was very close by, and they would reach it in less than 5 minutes. So she offered him to take a bath at her house immediately, and he agreed to do so. Of course, she was very happy and took him to her house and realized that it was her success in that case, and indeed her house was nearby, that when the owner saw it, he thought it was a cow barn. But the girl denied his opinion and said that it was her own home, and she also had no real desire for him to be in her home, but she did suggest that perhaps he should go back to the estate if he did not want to go inside. But the guy wanted to come in anyway, and she was not very happy about this situation. And when he found out that the girl did not have a bathroom and there was no hot water in her house, he was just shocked. Instead, the girl justified herself by saying that her friend was sitting at home without water, and compared to him she was still doing quite well. But she ordered him to take off his clothes and saw him shaved again, and she had very strange feelings and thought she was going crazy. She could not accept the fact that he could look beautiful even when he was covered with dirt, and she had seen him without clothes more than once, but still felt some shame at that. She told him that she would wait for him outside the door, and if he needed anything, he could call her at any time, because her bathroom was too cramped, so she needed to get out better. In fact, she was very surprised why she was feeling so uncomfortable, and she felt ashamed of it, and she couldn't collect her thoughts and understand her true feelings and solve this whole situation she was in now. The girl, when he came out of the bathroom, invited him to come into the bedroom because she had put a clean blanket there and he had thanked her, and now she decided to wash his clothes and hang them up to dry. In fact, it turned out that her clothes were also dirty and she had to take them all together, so she did so and took off her clothes and started to take a bath, and her mind kept thinking about the images of her husband hugging her, and she could not control herself. She realized that she needed to be focused and finish everything as quickly as possible, and if she delayed it could become a huge problem, and she did not understand why she was remembering his face at all right now. Then she knocked on the bedroom door where the man was, and he let her in, and she said that she had already done the laundry, but the clothes were still drying, and then at that moment she wondered why she had to knock when she went into her room at all. She noticed that her husband was surprisingly calm, because usually he was extremely angry, and could have blamed her for leaving him alone in such a dirty city and staying late, and could have ripped her throat out. Her heart continued to beat very strongly, and she thought that she had spoken so often about her love for this man that she might have believed her own words and put these terrible thoughts aside and continued to live her life as if nothing had happened. She told him that the clothes would not dry soon, so she offered to give him a massage, and then he could sleep a little bit and she would work better, and in principle, he was satisfied with this offer. The girl thought that normally she would have sat on a chair, but she didn't have that luxury at home, so she was very glad to have a bed, and now they were here together, it wasn't so bad. Suddenly the girl started touching his ears, and he didn't like it, and she just went into a kind of stupor because she couldn't explain why she did that, and she needed to explain something at that moment. She said that his ears were very beautiful, and her hand just slipped, and it was at that moment that the man put her on the bed and climbed on top of her and started kissing her. In fact, the girl was shocked, because it was not allowed, and he told her that she could push him away if she didn't like it, and she thought deep down that of course she didn't like it, because he was a dragon who wanted to rip out and eat her heart, but at the same time, for some reason, she couldn't refuse him. They continued to embrace, and the girl put all these thoughts aside and thought that there was no going back, and she let her feelings and emotions and desires run wild, and she did not take any action against it either. Mornings were not always refreshing because they were usually very hard, because you had to get out of your cozy blanket to get back to your tedious work, and today was the same for her day. In fact, her whole body ached, and she did not know what had happened to her clothes, but she suddenly found herself in the master's room and saw him and his subordinate talking to each other. Did he say that when the man brought the girl in, he thought it was just another corpse, but that it actually exceeded his expectations, and the girl jumped out of bed and did not understand what was happening and why she was here and not at home. She wanted to get some explanation, but the subordinate continued to talk to the master and said that it was not like him at all, because he did not intend to kill this girl, and it shocked him. In fact, the dragon himself did not understand why he would kill the girl and laughed about it. And the girl herself, when she heard this idea, was also shocked that he had already killed some people in his life and had to find out what it was about. Then the girl began to freak out and was very worried that they were talking about killing her. But the subordinate wanted to find out why his boss was doing this and what his plans were for this person, because it seemed that everything was blurry in his head and he could no longer explain rationally everything that was happening around him. The girl started to worry very much, because she knew that this man was a psycho, but she didn't think that he killed people so easily, and she would really go crazy around someone like that, and she had to find out why the man brought her to his room. But he explained that he just wanted to do it, and that was it. The girl did not know what was happening, but she was very scared and just wanted to be let out of here immediately, but the owner himself asked his subordinate to leave and leave them alone. He was very surprised because he had not yet been given the letter for the elders, but the master ordered him to write it himself and send it. But he did not even care about the handwriting, and in the end, he just had to agree with the dragon and obey its will. Then the girl realized that a man was staring at her and began to approach her. So she was already thinking about her future death in her head, because she was very scared, but he simply asked her if she liked him, and she was very surprised and almost fell through the ground from shame. Since yesterday, her heart has been beating very fast with fear, and he is deeply mistaken if he thinks that it is not anxiety on her part, and she has been looking away from him. He continued to look at her and was overcome with a strange feeling that he was hugging this woman with hair the color of a caterpillar, and moreover, it was the first time he was so excited, and he had never wanted anyone so much, and he felt this way about an ordinary person like her. It was strange, but next to her he was mixing passion and greed, and the feelings were very chaotic. So today he told her to rest with him, and she thought that it was impossible to do that because she had not yet gone crazy to stay here. They should have set a distance, but if she goes on like this, he still won't let her go that day. Then the girl began to beg him to let her go home. But still, she asked him for clothes, or at least some blankets, because she wanted to wash, but it was not comfortable for her to go out in the way she was dressed, so he taught her his clothes. Moreover, he started to dress her himself, but she said that she could dress herself and that it was not necessary, but he insisted on doing so and ordered her to stay still, because he would not do this twice, and she should not misunderstand him in this situation. She had to believe that there would be no more misunderstandings between them, and he was convincing her of this and wanted her to feel freer and less constrained and shy in his presence. The man was in an unusually good mood today, and this was because he was watching her in very funny and big clothes, and she had a very good lunch, so he was pleased. His subordinate used to give him an offering from the elder, but he said that he at least wrote a letter back, and since he had nothing to do but write, he decided to do it at last. Naturally, his subordinate was very happy, and when the paper was brought to him, he was very surprised to see so much, but he was so excited and in a hurry that he had brought everything and had to take advantage of the opportunity while the master was in a good mood. Then they unfolded the letter, which said that it was a lucky letter and had to be sent 7 times, and then he would receive his share of happiness 100%, otherwise he would be cursed and had to hurry because there were only 4 days left. They started to worry a lot because it was unclear what kind of psycho could have done this, and the subordinate promised to find the criminal who sent this letter because it was unthinkable and unacceptable. But the owner himself said that he had brought the letter personally, but he started to make excuses that he hadn't written it. But he didn't care, so he ordered him to just bring him ink and get everything ready immediately. Fortunately, he was not interested in this terrible letter, and they began to write letters to the elders, and the subordinate followed this process very closely so that his master would do everything correctly and according to the rules. Then they noticed that the maid spilled the ink directly on the letter, and the servant began to scream very much, and the maid was also very scared and apologized to the master, and said that she would wash his hands immediately. Then our protagonist, when she was lying in bed, was very surprised at what had happened because she heard some screaming, and she was frightened because she could not see anything, as she was resting under the covers in the afternoon. The maid knew at that moment that she was going to die, and the subordinate said that he would kill her, but then our hostess asked the girl that she was probably just hungry, and then told her that they would bring her dinner, which was about to be ready. The subordinate was extremely surprised that his boss seemed to have been replaced, and he realized that this was not the same person as before, because the wrong person had never behaved like this, and had never let anyone go without punishment, so it was worth thinking about this situation very carefully. Our hero understood that the girl was very scared, and when he approached the main character, who was hiding under the blanket, he also invited her to go to dinner and smiled at that moment. The subordinate thought that the lack of essence had made his head blurry and he really needed help, but he decided to remind him of the letter after he finished eating. Then the subordinate ordered the servant to clear the table, and the girl obeyed and suddenly grabbed the letter of happiness, which was supposedly a curse, but she could not read, so she did not understand what it was about, and thought that such a thing should not be thrown away, so she left it on the table further. Then this girl is shown talking to our protagonist and telling her not to be too surprised, but she didn't understand how this could happen because not even half a day had passed when her house just collapsed and she was just beside herself. To be honest, she started explaining that it was too unprofitable to live in, and she just couldn't believe it because it was true, and when it rained, she was literally shivering from the cold, and of course this house was only suitable for sleeping in because there were even some ghosts running around. Nevertheless, it was extremely precious to the girl herself, and she began to cry because she did not want to lose her home, where she had spent most of her life, and which was so precious to her that no matter how terrible it was, she could not lose it. Then she remembered the words of the master who had said that he did not want to see the house anymore, and realized that this fool had committed such a crime, and she hated him and wanted to kill him and have him struck by lightning, because he should not behave in this way under any circumstances. But the servants tried to calm her down and invited her to follow them, and they found themselves in the middle of the forest in complete darkness, but the scenery was incredibly beautiful, and that was because they were far away from the village, and now she would live here. She pointed out to her her new house, and it was really beautiful, and then she thought that there was a maid who lived here who was very expensive for the feudal lord, but then she ran away. Outside the house, of course, it was very beautiful, but 10 servants were assigned to the territory and forced to clean it up, and it was all because of this girl, because the owner himself ordered it, and now she needed to rest, and she could not believe that she was in such a situation that was very beneficial for her. She entered that house and could not get away from it and touched its walls, because it was not brick like the one she had before, but wooden, and had a high ceiling and 2 rooms and even hot water, and she was overwhelmed that the master had done all this for her. Suddenly she realized that if he found out who she really was, he would tear her to pieces, but she knew deep inside that she had to thank him, because it would be wrong to accept it for nothing. The girl went into the mansion and saw that there was chaos everywhere, and everyone was in a hurry, and there were not enough people and more workers were needed, and everyone was fussing and running all over the corridor. Another maid took our girl and told her that there was an incredible accident in the master's room, namely a fire, and it turned out that they had lit a scented candle for insomnia. But it fell and everything went wrong from there. The girl rushed into the room, and she was very afraid and wondered how the fire could have started, because she felt guilty about it, because yesterday she had cursed him, and perhaps those words had had such an effect on the whole situation. She felt very strange that the fire was only surrounded by the master's bed, and finally she ran to him and began to scream. But the master himself laughed at her because he found it funny how she ran and looked like a squirrel in a wheel. But because she had green hair, she looked more like a mutant, and when she looked at him after saying that, she was very angry and realized that she had been worrying about nothing, because he was perfectly fine and there was not even a scratch on him. The protagonist suddenly found a letter that was supposed to bring happiness, or if it was not sent, the person would be cursed, and in fact she could not read, so she did not understand its content. But the master's subordinate snatched the letter from her hands and was very surprised to see it, because he thought that the way the maid had cleaned yesterday, she should have thrown it away, and it turned out that this letter survived even after the fire, so perhaps it did have some power. Then the master interrupted their conversation and said that he would like to have breakfast, but it was probably too early for that, but the girl said that they had just told her that everything was ready, so she could go. Then he asked us if she would like to eat with him, and she of course agreed because she had no other choice, but deep down she was thinking that of course this person was not the person she wanted to be around, but still, when she was around him, something good and beautiful always happened in her life. But when they were already sitting at the table, our master raised the glass, and you can see how his hand that took it began to bleed, and the girl realized that she had probably cursed. But it turned out that this glass was of poor quality, and the subordinate said that he would immediately find the person who invented this thing and punish him for it. Our host was a little confused as to how he was going to punish him, and whether he needed the hands of someone who produces such poor quality goods, and thus hinted that he did not really need them at all. As the girl listened to all this, her insides were turning upside down, because she knew that she could not forget that this creature was an evil dragon, first of all, and he had come here to kill her and not leave a trace of her on this earth, and she realized that she had to get out of his dangerous grip. The story continues with a conversation between the protagonist and the owner, who tells her that she is wrong to be afraid, but she does not understand this remark about herself, so she asks him what he means. He explained to her that recently she had been shaking so much that she could not even eat properly, and that she was very afraid to cut off the artisan's hand, because he was not going to do it to her, but that she could be the target at any moment, of course, and she would be shaking with fear under any circumstances. The girl reassured herself that at least she was eating well, and that nothing could be more important than food, so it gave her pleasure and distracted her from certain events that were pressing and pressuring her. Then the master explained to her that, to be honest, he had made this decision because of her, and that he had not been able to sleep last night because she was not with him, and if she had been with him, he would not have had to light the candle, and it would not have caused any accident, no fire, and he would have been in a good mood, and he would have been able to forgive the boy. This explanation of his actions simply stunned the girl, and she thought it was all nonsense, and now she did not know what he wanted from her at all, because it turned out that he did not know it himself, and said that she should try to make him feel much better at that moment. The girl was sickened by these words, and he told her that if she succeeded, he would be able to leave such a craftsman alone, and they came to the point where they embraced, and he kissed her. But it was obvious that she was extremely uncomfortable or was restraining herself from doing so and was going crazy. He was saying to her that every inch of her body was incredibly delicious, and he wanted to eat her whole and completely. And the girl just fell into incredible horror at these words and began to make excuses that she was not tasty and begged him not to eat her. But suddenly his subordinate passed by, and now they were not alone, and since the master's room had burned down, he was forced to stay in his room, but in any case they almost gave themselves away in this situation. Of course, the master did not like this and was angry with his subordinate and wanted to cut off his hands, but he would certainly not die from such minor cuts, and so he thought that at least his fingers should be broken. But the subordinate did not understand why his master was talking about him in this way, because he had just come to his room and did not touch anyone. As our girl thought, the strange thing about the whole situation was that it all started with the fire yesterday, because the master was surrounded by all sorts of trouble. Namely, she mentioned that the apples he had received as a gift were rotten, and the fence he was leaning on just collapsed to the ground, and a passing cart showered him with potato hail, and she was really worried, because if things stayed the way they were, she was sure he would blame her again. The girl was determined to approach him and suggested that they take a walk and go back, because she felt that the weather was getting a little bit worse and it was really clearly not on their side, and it looked like it was going to rain, so they needed to go back. But at that moment, when he was turning around, he tripped over something and fell on the floor right into the mud, and the girl laughed a little bit at that, and of course she immediately apologized and said that they had to go back to the estate very quickly. When they arrived, he was not in a very pleasant condition, both externally and internally, and instead of going straight to the castle, it would be better if the girl first put him in order in her house, which was certainly new to her, and in a pleasant atmosphere she could invite this respectable man to her. She suggested that the man take a shower, because she already had a bathtub and warm water, so there was nothing to worry about, but instead he said that he would rather experiment with her, and he wanted to know how cursed he was, so he grabbed her and was going to kiss her with a dirty face. But at that moment a candlestick fell from the shelf on our master's head and hit him right on the back of the head, and he got a lump on that spot, and it turned out that this man was really cursed because of the letter he had received. Then our master immediately burst into his office and ordered his subordinate to bring him paper and ink, because he had to deal with everything immediately, because he could not go on like this. The subordinate had already prepared everything so that there would be no problem with the process, and even if he got everything wet with ink, everything would be fine, and it turned out that the lucky letter was really a devil's letter, for since he had received it, everything had gone wrong in his life. Now, whenever he is near the caterpillar, he looks just terrible, and yesterday he could not even be with her, and today he fell into the dirty water, and he is again and again in a disadvantageous light before her, and this surprised the subordinate to the point of being surprised. Then he decided to entertain the idea that perhaps the green man simply liked him. And of course the master began to disavow the idea because it was as if he had fallen into some kind of delirium and had asked him something really stupid. He explained to him that it was not he who felt sympathy for her, but on the contrary, she was crazy about him and her fantasies about the ideal him were simply destroyed now, and he wanted to live up to his status in her eyes. Now at last it was good, and he could send these letters to the elders, but the subordinate did not want to send this happy letter to the elders, although our master thought they were perfect for it. Our master wrote the letter to the elders and also handled the good luck letter, and it turned out that he had killed 2 birds with 1 stone, and the subordinate was just out of his mind about this situation and thought that his master had just gone crazy. This spam, or rather a lucky letter, went around in circles in the hands of the dragon elders, and for a moment it seemed that everything was over, but now it started again, and it was not known how to get rid of it. Then the master called the girl to him and told her that she could see him in the morning and admire him, and that she should consider it an honor, and of course she smiled at this inwardly, but she thanked him in person for this sincerity. He was obviously very happy that this girl liked him, but still he told her not to love him too much, because later it would hurt her much more, and suggested that she reduce her sympathy for him a little bit, and he knew of course that it would not be at the snap of a finger, but still she should try to do it. Come to think of it, he had always called her the green man or the caterpillar because he didn't even know her name, and he loved that she loved him so passionately, so he wondered if it was time to find out her name. When he asked her, she was a little frightened, but she told him her real name, and he thought it was very strange. He told her that he thought it was hard for her to stand still, so he asked her to sit on his bed, but she was saying in her heart that it was hard for her to wake up so early, and she really wanted to crawl under the covers. But instead she had to give him a massage, and when she sat down on the bed, she touched his face with her hand, and it led to a very embarrassing moment, and he was even surprised by it. But he explained to her that he was going to ask her to touch him anyway, so she didn't have to apologize for doing that, and she understood that this face made her forget about sleep, and now they had already decided to continue the whole process, because usually her heart was beating very strongly during this. Then the boyfriend saw something in her pocket, and he asked what it was, and she said that she didn't really know because she couldn't read it, and he looked at it himself, and it turned out that it was the letter of happiness, and he ordered his subordinate to immediately send the girl's letters to the elders as well. He also had to find this bastard who was writing these letters and deal with him very well, because it was already crossing the line, and he was really angry about the whole situation. After a few days of very deliberate searching, a certain hennin was caught in a trap and began to make very strong excuses to his master so that he would not punish him but pardon him. As a result of the handwriting check, it was confirmed that the letter received was also their handiwork, and this all led to an incredible fury and anger on the part of our master. In fact, he did not realize how very stupid it was on his part, because it was completely unreasonable to send such a letter to the master. But the man of course apologized to him very much, because his son was a child who had not even married yet, so he asked to kill him rather than him. At this self-sacrifice, our master just laughed, because he was not going to let them both live, but promised them all to die. And these were not just words, but even such a small thing was not ignored by this master, which showed that he could undoubtedly kill anyone, and the girl did not want to accept this fact. She really didn't want to see it and didn't want to be there at that moment, and as much as she disliked these 2 people, they were about to die, and it was just senseless on her part, and she couldn't take it anymore. In fact, she remembered her master saying that he could not believe that she had personally eaten his essence, and he told her to hide somewhere until the core was fully established in her body, and until then she should memorize his name and just be afraid for the rest of her life. As a result of these guesses, the girl began to feel that she could not breathe and could not even take a breath to answer something, and she was just wrapped up in certain thoughts, and if she did not answer, and if she was afraid, then it would arouse suspicion among everyone around her and her identity could be revealed, and she would simply die. The girl was terrified, and the owner was actually very scared when he saw the state of the girl and advised her to just breathe and tried to reassure her that everything was fine and she had to breathe in and out slowly and then she would definitely feel better because everything was really normal and she was not in danger. In fact, she said that she was very afraid and asked him not to kill her, and the two men, who were still trembling from the horror created by the master himself, agreed with the girl and asked for mercy and blessing from such a respected person. Of course, the man was completely indifferent and indifferent to everyone, but as soon as he saw the state of the girl at that moment, and it surprised him, and he hugged her and told her to close her eyes because nothing terrible would happen to her. But she began to cry very much and said that she was very, very scared. It was very ironic because the fear that this man had caused her was made to disappear by him when he started hugging her and calming her down, so of course she couldn't sort out all her feelings and emotions towards him, and she was completely out of touch with herself. When she didn't know at all when that might change, but the moment he found out who she really was, she imagined him with an angry face and how he might pierce her heart and take her essence, and the moment her heart was ripped out, she would feel incredible pain, and that would be the end of her life. In the next shot, the girl was already lying in her bed, and there was a man over her, asking her how she felt, because he knew she would be scared, but he did not think she would faint, and on these emotions she was pierced and felt incredibly ashamed, so she apologized to him for her behavior, which made him feel that way. When he reached out his hand to her, she was very frightened because it seemed to be bloody, and he did not really understand this reaction, but thought that he was actually frightening her and asked her directly what was the reason for this, but she could not even open her mouth in his presence and answer him. She was well aware that her behavior would only arouse more suspicion and that her behavior could be discovered, but she apologized to him anyway, and did not want things to turn out this way. But then she heard an apology from the owner himself, who promised her that he would try not to disturb her in the future under any circumstances, and he really showed his sincerity towards her and held her hand because he was very worried. People began to discuss the news that the feudal lord's son had been expelled from the village and that a boy from a neighboring village had played a trick on him and sent a letter that was supposed to be sent to 7 people, and the feudal lord's son had sent it to that important master. In the end, he was punished by being made to leave penniless, and of course all the servants laughed at this situation because they thought that this man really had no brains and thought him to be completely stupid. But how he managed to deliver the letter to such an important person was really unknown and a great mystery, because the master himself was now visiting the new city. Why this was done is not known, and despite this, he did not leave there, and it was impossible to say for sure. But it seems that he was going to stay there for a long time, and this was a great chance to make an acquaintance with him, and this idea was considered to be really very beneficial for everyone. The following is a conversation between a girl who could not understand that she was being asked to leave her home, and the person was very angry because it was not clear why the girl thought that this was her home, because she was just allowed to live there at the request of the owner, and she just got up to no good. In this case, the girl's mood completely deteriorated, and she thought that it would have been better to die then, rather than go through all this, and of course the man was still angry, and did not know why aristocrats were so frequent in their town, and he did not like it very much. They all needed a room, and the mansion was bursting at the seams, and there were no vacancies, so they decided to use this house, and it was clear that before that everything had to be cleaned, so our protagonist was kicked out, and the maids were ordered to start working immediately. The girl had no idea what to do in this situation and what to do next, but the man offered her a place to stay for the night because he didn't really care about her. But of course she really wanted to ask the owner to just kill the man because he was really pissing her off. Then a friend of hers ran up to the girl and invited her to stay with her, and although it was cramped, she did not mind at all, and she was very happy, for she thought that this person was a real angel in her life, and it seemed that even she could see real wings growing out of her. Then the man became even more angry with the girls and told them to hurry up and get out of here and not to interfere with his work, and they just started running away from him screaming because they were afraid. The girl stayed at home, but thanks to the girl who offered her help, she avoided spending the night on the street. But while she was fussing, she forgot how awkward the situation was between her and her master after the day they had hugged, and he had apologized to her for his behavior. She could not realize what it was because he was unhappy, because the maid was crying to him, and she should have been angry, not him, and then when he asked her if she loved him, it was a bit of a shock to her. She apologized to him because it was very difficult for her to collect her thoughts, and she did not know in her heart of hearts whether it was right that she should continue to pretend that she really loved him and fussed and embarrassed about it. The man asked her if she was still afraid of him because he had not killed the man, but she was very surprised because she did not understand why he was so upset, like a puppy who had done something wrong. And of course she thought he was very nice, but she tried to push those thoughts away because he was still the man who wanted to kill her, but she did not know it yet. In fact, she apologized to him herself, because at the time she explained that she was out of control and promised him that it would not happen again, and he was very puzzled indeed and said that she had no reason to be afraid of him anymore, and now it was not clear why he was suddenly saying this to her. Then the girl is standing in front of her friend and tells him the latest events that have happened to her, and in fact he is very surprised at how much she has been through, and that she has suffered a lot, but she had no other choice, and now she wanted to ask him what his future plans are. He was referring to his washing, because since her house had collapsed, he had nowhere to wash, because he used to go to her all the time for that, and of course it was a great excuse for him, and he was really upset. Their conversation was interrupted because it was getting very dark outside, and it was time to go home, and it was really very fast, but it was not too late. But still the boy was worried because he heard that among the guests who had just arrived was a man who was trying to get the maids to go to bed with him, and so he was very worried about the girl herself. The girl was shocked by the news, but she had to tell him, even though she thought no one would be interested, and he agreed with her, but also offered to accompany her because it would be much safer and more fun together. But the girl began to dissuade him because she reassured him that if she left right now, everything would be fine, but she was very grateful to him for his worries, and he agreed with her and decided to let her go alone. Thus tomorrow was going to be a difficult day, so she needed to be very well rested, and he sent her on her way and told her to be careful. And now that she was alone in the forest, she was very much disturbed and really began to be afraid. The girl bumped into a man, and at that moment she realized that she was going to be the next victim, and her legs gave out, but she turned around and began to speak. The man asked her if she was going to the mansion, and if so, she needed to go the other way, but she did not understand why she needed to go back there, and he suddenly grabbed her head and put her down on the floor. In fact, he said that she was very lucky to spend the night with someone like him. And now she was very, very, very unfocused, but when he took off his pants in front of her, she pointed to a pimple between his legs. He hit her in the face for that, and she thought that if he hit her like that again, she would definitely lose consciousness, and she did not know what to do next. But very suddenly, her friend appeared and started throwing apples at him, and thus saved the girl from his violence, and he was already beaten, and the girls ran very far and fast. In fact, the girl was very grateful for the rescue, and indeed it was very valuable to her. And then she asked why she was not at home, but she confessed that she was at the mansion because a banquet was about to begin, and she had not heard anything about it, so she was curious about it. It turned out that she had missed the preparations for the banquet while she was serving her master, and many aristocrats had come to see him. But he had never given them any attention, and they were hoping that they would be able to meet him at least at this banquet. The girl thought it was very strange because she thought he was just a merchant, and her friend told her that it was a secret, but she heard that he was from the imperial family and told her in her ear, and she screamed, "His Majesty the Emperor," and he was the sole owner of the blue diamond mines. But now they are sold in the guild not one piece at a time, but 1,000 at a time, and you need a permit to get such stones." Of course, it was unclear how the man had managed to get it, and that was because he might have been from the imperial family, and that was how they had figured him out, because they had heard it from the guests, but the girl could not believe it, because she knew he was a dragon, and she had already thought he was the imperial lizard. So the aristocrats tried to make friends with him, and they all gathered in this place, and suddenly the girls were caught by some knights, and they were frightened and did not know what to do. Of course, they were not allowed to be on that territory, and they suspected them of something very dangerous, and the girl realized that it was no longer their home, so she started to freak out. Now our girls were tied up, and they realized that they were in incredible trouble, and some girl was shouting at them and demanding that they be punished immediately. Her servant tried to calm her down and tell her not to worry about such trifles because he promised that he would personally punish them. But she was still restless and shouted at him and wanted to see them suffer personally because they had broken into her house. If her knights had not found them, no one knows what might have happened, but she felt very painful in her heart, because it was really her house, and it had only been given to her for a time, and she knew that it should not be so. The protagonist decided to apologize after all, and admitted her guilt, and said she was sorry, although she knew deep down that it was unfair that she had to apologize, and it was extremely offensive to her. But the current owner of the house could not calm down and would not accept her apology because she wanted to punish her and make her get what she deserved and did not want to let the girls out until she was no longer angry. Very suddenly, the owner himself appeared in this house and was really unhappy with what was happening here, but as it turned out, he had been suffering from insomnia lately. But he was able to sleep thanks to one very skillful servant, and that was our main character. So he was unhappy because this maid was taken away from him, and now he could not sleep properly, and his life was ruined. So of course he was angry with the landlady, and you can see how she was afraid of this man's anger. Now he wanted that person to be held responsible for his interrupted sleep, and he was looking for someone to take the blame, but the woman began to make excuses to him that she had not intended to make any noise, and that it was because of those girls who were supposedly going to rob her house and cause trouble. The girl was shocked by this statement and wanted the owner to believe her, because it was not as she described it, and he asked her where she lived, and she replied that she lived in a mud house behind the estate and had prepared many gifts for him and thought that they had found out about it and decided to steal it all. Although in fact our master could not understand how this was possible and how they could have known that he had bought the house for blue diamonds, and it turned out that the house was hers and it was some kind of misunderstanding, mistake, and accident. This made our master very angry, and he decided to kill the servant, who apologized to him, but he would not show him any mercy and said that he would have to make good the damage and that he should bring the blue diamonds or else he would tear him up inside. Or he offered that he could just work for him, seeing how frightened the girl was by his behavior and deciding to calm himself down a bit in that case. He kicked this pseudo-owner of the house out of the house because she was the one who had trespassed, and he did not want to listen to her anymore and told her to be glad that he did not just kill her on the spot. The girl was alone when they were released, and their hands were untied and analyzed the whole situation and remembered how the owner was just angry and ordered to burn all the gifts that the lady had brought, and she could not say a word, and it was thanks to him that the situation ended without blood. Then the girl was going to the master and thought that she should give him a massage so that he would fall asleep sooner, but he stopped her and said that something had happened to her face, which had some redness on it. The girl was silent, but he didn't want her to make him ask her 2 times, and she said and confessed to him directly that some psycho had hit her, and this made him even more shocked and angry, and he demanded that she tell him more about it. The protagonist continued to say that they ran as fast as they could and stopped only at her house, but in the past, and they really weren't going to steal that gold or anything else, and she cried with shame and anger because she knew he would never believe her, because he was an aristocrat himself, and they were all the same. In fact, these aristocrats would not have batted an eyelid if they were ordinary people, and they were even shouting, and this was quite understandable, but the way the master reacted to this was very impressive to her, for he probably believed her. The protagonist did not want him to think that she was a liar and a thief, and in his eyes she looked away because she was ashamed and did not know what to say when he asked her if it was because she loved him. It didn't matter to him whether she really wanted to steal something or not, because nothing would make him love her, and she knew it, and still she didn't want him to think badly of her deep down. But she didn't really love him, and she didn't want him to think she was a thief just because that would ruin her reputation forever, and she convinced herself that she couldn't really fall in love with him, not really. Thus, the master's subordinate knocked on their door, and he called him in because he wanted to entrust him with a very important task, namely to find something for him. He ordered him to tell him that he would have his presence at that banquet, and that was to be very good news for everyone and joyful, because that was what all the aristocrats who would be there to meet our hero wanted to achieve. Some time later, a ball began at the mansion, and the master, who had always been indifferent to such events, for some reason became very interested in it and told everyone that he would attend. This news caused the atmosphere among the guests to be somewhat aggravated to the very limit, and because of this there was not even a moment's peace in the hearing, and the irritation of the aristocracy grew more and more. The orchestra was playing poorly, and there was so little room for our distinguished guests to dance, and they did not like the cheap snacks, and the maids were also very angry with them, because they could have cooked themselves in this case, but they restrained themselves as best they could. The reason why they hadn't all left yet was because of the owner, who was sitting in the middle of the room, and he really didn't feel very comfortable being in the middle of this place, and seeing how they were trying to make friends with him, and it made him incredibly angry. The girl watched all this and saw how everyone wanted to get close to the host, but it seemed that they were not succeeding, and now she saw among the guests the man who had attacked her in the forest and wanted to rape her, and she wanted to ignore it, but it was impossible to avoid it. Then what happened was that one of the servants dropped and broke the service, and that man was very annoyed that he started humiliating him and beating him right on the floor and did not allow him to get up because he called him a dog that should walk on 4 legs, and everyone started mocking him and laughing, and it was a kind of entertainment for them. Our protagonist was looking at this whole spectacle and gritting her teeth because she was just incredibly angry at how this could be tolerated, and no one even wanted to defend that guy and vice versa. They kept laughing and just considered them to be some kind of inhumans. He continued to kick him and ordered him to crawl and wanted the poor man to entertain them, and everyone looked on and obeyed him, and the master himself suddenly sat and watched the whole spectacle and intervened. To this whole situation he said that it was quite a curious thing, and in the end the girl realized that he was no different from all these aristocrats, and the situation became more and more heated. Then our master stood up and ordered all the servants to be taken out of the room immediately, and the girl did not understand what he was planning at that moment. The poorest guy who was being kicked was also taken out by the maids and helped to get up, because he had to go to the doctor immediately, and it was very serious because he was all knocked down and beaten and needed really good help. The guy was really worried and said that if anyone asked, they had to explain what had happened, and the girls promised that they would do everything properly, and the girl was really eager to find out what was going on in that room, while they were all taken out of the room because there were too many guards, and it was also impossible to get there and see out of the corner of your eye. The girl accepted that she would have to wait here until something changed, and the sun had already touched the sky, and the door had not been opened that day. It was only when the sun finally came up that they were opened, and all the aristocrats came out in a stream, who were very frightened and just ran away from the estate, and the girl was very, very impressed by this sight and wanted to know what had happened. In fact, it was all very terrifying, because she could not believe that an aristocrat was worthy of doing something so terrible, and she could hear them discussing the situation, and saying that they had enough of this talk, and that they had to get out of here quickly, and it was really not clear from this talk exactly what had happened. A few hours ago, it happened that when our master was alone with the aristocrats, he was confronted by the man who had beaten the servant and who had attacked the girl, and the master knew all this because his servant had told him. When he listened to the dossier on this man, he wanted to tear off his limbs and feed him to wild animals, but he had to act reasonably so as not to injure the girl, so he ordered all the servants to be taken out of here and dealt with this terrible person in his own way. Lately, he hasn't recognized himself, and he's not only worried about what this scoundrel has done to the girl, but he doesn't want to kill him in front of her just because he's lost his essence. When they were now face to face, the master ordered the aristocrat to crawl also, but he was very much surprised, for he had a certain dignified name and could not afford to do so, and yet he was determined to act. The master was very annoyed with him, and when he began to get mad and say that he had taken too much liberty and that he could not order him to do anything and said that he belonged on the floor, it certainly did not end well. After these words, our master said that for an animal he was very stupid and called himself a human being, but the guards grabbed him and would not let him go. So the master continued to say that he was the very person who had mocked and attacked the village girls, so he could say goodbye to his dignity right now, and all the aristocrats were shocked. When all this happened, the master's subordinate was very frightened because he would have to clean up the mess and calm the guests down, and he did not want to do that. Now, when the girl saw the master come out of the door, she looked at him and wondered what he had done and how he had managed to solve the whole situation. On that day, all the guests left the place, and it was finally restored to a quiet and peaceful life, and everyone began to laugh and live peacefully, and the atmosphere in the village was also changed in general. Before, whenever they saw the master, they used to tremble like a leaf of aspen, but now they greeted him joyfully whenever they saw him, and the girl did not know who actually started the rumor, but they all whispered that he had fought back against the tyranny of the aristocrats, and for that he was greatly respected and loved. Every day more and more people considered him their hero now, and then everyone learned that he had saved the reputation of the girls who served him, and began to publicly praise him for this act. The villagers even sent our master all kinds of gifts, and he didn't really like it very much and thought it was too much, but the rumor was not the biggest problem in his life because he didn't know what to do if the girl loved him even more after this situation. The girl now considered him not only her hero, but the hero of everyone around her, and the master thought that if the news spread, it would only get much worse, and he wanted to keep her to himself, or she was very good at massage, but if he felt sorry for her, it would not end well. Although in his opinion it was not so bad, as long as she did not stop thinking about him, he would try to humble her in some way, and while he was thinking about this situation, he met a girl who wanted to ask him something. She behaved very purposefully towards him, and he was very surprised that she was not even going to hide her feelings, and she hid herself, which was very alarming for the girl because she was afraid that he finally recognized her and maybe her black hair had already grown back, and he started to figure her out and guess who she really was and was beating her right now. But he continued to say that he could see very well how much she loved him and could not even control herself in his presence, and it was very difficult for him to ignore such strong feelings towards him, and then the girl felt better because he was talking nonsense. He asked her not to let her emotions run wild, and she promised him that she would control herself in the future. And when he asked her, and she agreed so easily, he was very surprised that she answered so sharply, and also thought that they would have to replay the situation somehow. Then she turned on her actress and began to cry in front of him and apologized that her heart had caused her so much pain, and she did not expect anything in return from him, but would deal with her feelings herself so as not to cause him any inconvenience, and thought that now he was quite happy with the situation. But in fact, this was not the case, and he did not like it at all. But the girl tried very hard to show her submission to him, and then realized that after she had almost been mistaken for a thief, he would no longer trust her. It was already dark outside, and our master was getting ready for bed and thinking in his mind that the girl's heart was now broken into millions of pieces, but if it was her desire for him, she would try not to disappoint him, and he was really worried about the whole situation, and he cared about the feelings of that girl, which was driving him crazy. Because of this, he could not exactly sleep in any way and thought that he had overreacted to the situation and caused her incredible emotional pain, and she still gave him a massage and took care of his insomnia, and he felt guilty about it. So he decided that tomorrow he would try to repay her properly, and he began to think about how he could reward her and what would be suitable for her personally in this situation and would touch her and somehow entertain her in such a difficult situation. When the next day came, he met the girl in the garden and told her that he had good and bad news for her, and he decided to start with the good news and said that he would go out with her. This confession stunned the girl because it was not her dream, and she really thought and doubted that it was good news, and it came out of her mouth out loud. But she was really very surprised because she thought it was her birthday, and she was indescribably happy. But our master did not believe her very much at first and doubted her sincerity. But she began to convince him that her heart was beating very fast, and she could not believe what had just happened. And of course this made our hero very happy. So he decided to tell her the bad news. He told her that the bad news was that he had some business to attend to and would have to leave her for a while, and she might die of boredom, and he was quite right in his opinion. For she looked as if the whole world had collapsed in her eyes, but in reality she just thought that at last she might be saved. In her opinion, it appeared that he would no longer be looking for the girl here and from the north, and she might indeed be saved, and she was safe, and she almost screamed with joy now and almost gave herself away, because for 10 years she had been trembling with the memory of this man, and he had let her live. Of course, our master expected some kind of reaction from the girl, but she thought deep down that she was very grateful to him that he was finally leaving her, and that he was giving her life, and now she could finally say goodbye to him. But in real life she asked when he was leaving. He said that first of all they would go on a date, so she shouldn't worry, and in fact she didn't know how to describe her real feelings because she was actually very sad for some reason at the thought of him leaving, and she made a rather strange face that he also noticed. But then she was told that he wasn't going away forever, and that made her angry, but she would have to wait a little bit, and he was comforting her so she wouldn't cry, but this date really started to depress her and made her very sad. She knew that it would be better for her to control her feelings as he had asked her to do, and in fact he was upset and turned around and left her. But it was very strange that on the way back the master did not say a word to her, which made her feel quite uncomfortable. She didn't understand why he was offended, because she thought she might have said something wrong, but in any case he would have reacted then, and when she sat in her room and thought about it, she still paid attention to the expression on his face the last time she saw him. In the meantime, the maidservants around her began to mock her for being up in the clouds again, for she had been called several times and had not answered, although they could understand why she was acting like this, for she was going out for the first time in her life. In fact, they were very happy for her as real friends, but the girl did not understand them at all, because it was really very bad, and she felt incredibly unhappy at that moment and did not know how everything would turn out in her future life. Finally, the day came when the girl was picking out an outfit for this date. She was offered a variety of dresses from very neat and cute and too straight, and the color was quite faded and various fashionable things, and offered a short dress, but the girl was still just furious with all these suggestions and wanted everyone to shut up. The girl thanked them very much for being so concerned, but they shouldn't have been so overzealous in this situation, and she said that she would just wear some of her normal clothes, which shocked all the girls because they couldn't wear their normal clothes and they were completely worn out and too plain. She didn't really want to go to the first place, but he forced her to go and she couldn't do anything else, and now when she told the girls, they didn't believe her of course, because they didn't know who the person was who forced her to go. In fact, the girls still didn't know who she was going out with, and she kept it a secret, but she told them that he was much better looking than her and richer and certainly better dressed, and in that case she didn't know what the point of dressing up was, because her usual clothes would have been just fine. The friend's girls said they had a hunch who she was going out with, but at that moment her friend came in, and she immediately kicked them all out of her room and said she would figure out how to get ready for the date and didn't need their help or advice anymore. When the boyfriend asked where she was going, she told him that she was going on a date, and he was very upset about this, but she began to make excuses that it was not a date at all, but a simple walk, because she did not even want to go. In this case, the boyfriend pretended to be very happy for the girl and wished her to have a good day, and the girl suddenly thought for a moment that he was very hurt by the fact that he had found out about the date and was a little surprised. Finally, the day of the date came, and the girl had put on her dress, and it was clean and elegant, and she probably thought that it was quite suitable for this kind of situation, because she was not going to put on a certain kind of chic and beautiful appearance in his eyes anyway. However, she was very well aware that it was still a date, and she had to follow the rules of certain behavior and be well-mannered, because after all, it was really the first date of her life. When the boy saw the girl with his own eyes, he said that he would never go out with her dressed like that, and now she did not know what to do because it was the best dress the girls had lent her, and now she felt quite uncomfortable in his presence. The master said that he had expected something like this, so he had prepared everything earlier and ordered the servants to bring the girl in, and they took her with them and went to make her marathon and got her ready for the date properly. When they had finished with her image, it was quite nice, but she was very tired, although the result was still stunning, and he had taken care of everything for this date, and she was wearing someone else's clothes for the first time, which she liked very much and which made her look like a real princess, and she began to feel some emotions at that moment for that man. At last the girl was told by the master's servants that he was waiting for her, and when she entered the room she saw this man so beautifully dressed that she seemed to fall in love with him, and said that he was more and more beautiful every time she saw him, and this was really sincere on her part. The boy liked it very much that the girl was falling more and more in love with him, and he often asked her questions about it, and usually she answered in a way that supported the image of a fool in love. But it was really true, and now she was saying it quite sincerely, and it was impossible to deny it, so they took off and went for a walk together. When they went out, everyone admired the couple very much, and everyone was willing to stop what they were doing to look at the master, and when they saw such a simple servant girl next to him, they felt a certain superiority over them and thought she was special at that moment. The girl looked directly into the eyes of the master, and she was not surprised, but she walked alongside him, she did not care, and she seized every opportunity to admire him, and he suddenly asked her if she was in pain, because she looked very strange in his eyes. She blushed very sharply, and he thought that maybe the sun was baking extremely hard, and they should maybe take an umbrella, but the girl assured him that everything was fine, and she had never been on a date before, so she was very nervous and worried. The girl got so carried away with herself that even the owner noticed her, and she needed to get over it immediately in order to continue the day. And of course, our owner knew very well that this was the first time she had ever experienced this, so he was not surprised and just continued to laugh at her. Then he confessed to her that it was also his first time, and she agreed because he would not have wasted his time with anyone else, and she could not imagine him asking someone out. And if it were not for her situation, he would not have even looked at her. Suddenly, while they were walking, the girl almost tripped over something on the road and fell, but the owner caught her and foresaw the whole situation, which could have ended in the worst possible way. He wanted the girl to be much more careful and asked her what she was thinking about, that she didn't notice a certain quail on the road, and next time he wouldn't be able to catch her, so she needed to be much more careful. Of course, the girl knew that she would not have another chance, and she was a little upset and promised him with a downcast face to be more careful. But he did not understand why she was so sad, for he thought perhaps she had hurt herself. The girl just remembered that she would not get another chance, and therefore she had to make the most of it, and she finally came to her senses and smiled at him and told him that everything was fine because he had come to her at the right time and saved her, and it was an honor for her, and she would now have a good time in front of him. Nevertheless, they decided to continue their walk and begin their date as follows, and they came to the river, and he put her in the boat, and they now began a water walk that surprised the girl very much, because they were surrounded by incredible beauty around them that she had never seen with her own eyes before. They were surrounded by incredible beauty, landscape and field and flowers and nature, and finally they reached their destination on the other side, and it was a very beautiful meadow, and there was a picnic with various delicacies and beautiful and aesthetically prepared food waiting for them. So when they started to eat, the girl was eating very well and was delighted with the whole situation, and the boy was looking at her with delight as well, because she looked very happy, and it brought him incredible joy, and now he remembered that it was because of one thing that his subordinate had brought him. From the moment the Dragon Master appeared in this world, that is, from the time he hatched from the egg, he has spent almost all his time with his servant, but he has never praised his servant, and this has never happened in the 600 years of their existence, and now that he has done so for the first time, he is very much alarmed. All these years he had done so much for his master, but he only praised him now when he gave him a book about dating that would make him swoon. And this book was based on the experiences of 1,000 people, and thus it surprised the subordinate very much, and he did not know how to react. For a perfect date, you need not only to dress well, but also to be able to anticipate all the wishes of your partner, and our boss was a master at this, so he thought he had every chance to become a real macho man in the eyes of this girl. Now that they were back to real time in their date, it was coming to an end, and so the boyfriend suggested that she enjoy a tea party, and earlier when he had suggested that she have tea, she had really wanted to eat something beforehand, but now that she had filled her stomach, she was ready to drink something. The gentleman really made a perfect date for her, and thus it was not surprising for him to hear, because he really liked to try new things with her, and the girl was very happy that he told her that, and started laughing because she was very happy, since it was his first date, and she was glad that he was satisfied. He told the girl that he was also very happy, and they sat and enjoyed each other in the present moment, and just appreciated what they had in that moment, and it was impossible to make them angry or spoil it. Now they could watch and enjoy the sunset, and it was time for them to leave, but they really exchanged their emotions because it was a beautiful day, and the girl said she would walk him to the mansion, but the boy objected and said it was his doing. When the gentleman volunteered to walk the girl home, she said that he did not have to do so, but that in his opinion, a perfect date should have ended accordingly, and that was right, because no one knows when they will have such a chance again, and it may never happen again. It was already quite dark, and they approached her house, and she only now realized that this was all true, and that this date was finally over, and they might never see each other again, and it was very strange because their separation was now causing her pain. If they break up with each other, they will not be able to coexist normally anymore, and now that they have broken up, the girl's heart is shrinking deep inside, and she decided to run to him and asked him not to leave her. She was not herself now, and they threw off their clothes and began to kiss right at that moment, and when they reached their bed, she began to realize that for 10 years this man had been a source of fear for her, but she wanted to be close to him always, and at that moment she was incredibly happy when she kissed him. Now, after a while, she felt a bit tired, and she was lying in her bed and felt that this feeling did not leave her even in her sleep, and now she did not want to be angry because he had a really terrible character, and with his appearance and skills this character would not be superfluous, and she felt that she was unlucky, but she loved him anyway. When the girl woke up, her master was lying in front of her, and she now realized that she had slept with him and began to apologize to him because she had mumbled something in her sleep and did not really know what to say to him because he was going to leave her, but she had made him become attached to her. She was really so sad that she got a little angry, and so she said some unnecessary things, and only now the master realized that she might actually be angry with him. But she denied this idea and explained that it is just that when she is heartbroken she begins to hate the whole world, and she wanted to say that she was not angry with him, but with her fate, because she was in such a state that she spoke out very accidentally. She wanted to forget the moment and hoped that the master would understand her correctly, but when he asked her if she would be angry when he left, she said that it was all right because she should not be hurt, and even if he had a terrible temper, she was still very lucky. In the end, the master didn't like to hear that about himself, and she thought it was the truth. But it was very hard for him to hear and leave her alone, because she hadn't expected to hear him say that, and her heart was beating even faster, and her ears were red as if they were going to explode, and she was trying to just wrap herself in calmness and react appropriately. The girl thought to herself that it was impossible that this self-righteous dragon should have just fallen in love with her and confessed his true feelings for her, but nevertheless they began to kiss again and continued to spend time together. The next day, the man was in his mansion talking to his subordinate, who was screaming because he had spent the night with that girl and had not even warned him, but this only exhausted our master, for he did not want to hear anything more about it. In fact, the subordinate was very worried about the master, but something could have really happened, and yet he suddenly turned away and felt some kind of anxiety and blushed, and it was not clear what the reaction was. Their world consisted of a supernatural world ruled by angels, as well as an underworld ruled by demons, and of course there was a middle world ruled by dragons, and the master, as a member of the ruling family and a being who would inherit the throne, had to think about his successor in the next life. Of course, the master himself was not in the least interested in raising children, so he chose another method and found a suitable person to play the role of his puppet. And from among the members of several families who were secretly serving the dragon, his subordinate chose one who could play the role of a fake ruler, and to avoid suspicion from the aristocracy, he chose a commoner as his wife. For the sake of this whole process, a bride show was arranged for our master, and now the subordinate was informed that he had only to come to the court and simply accept and choose the best candidate. The master had ordered him to plan everything so that he could return in a few weeks, but this was not enough, because he had to be 100% sure that this girl was a good match for him, and now it was not clear why he was rushing things so much. In fact, the owner was somewhat depressed that he had to leave his girlfriend for such a long time and wrapped himself in a blanket and did not want to talk to anyone. But the subordinate continued to tell him about their plans, because the owner of the estate said that soon all the residents who had left here earlier would return, and besides, he also had to catch the northern man and deal with him. But the boy could not think of all these plans because he had only the girl to whom he had promised to return, and he wanted to keep his promise because that girl might just die of him without him. And there was no telling how the Lord wanted to find a ruler in 2 weeks, and now he refused to marry, and he was even willing to postpone the coronation, all for the sake of a girl. It seems that she really sank deeply into his heart, and the subordinate decided that this man was not yet ready to admit it, but still it was clear, and he decided to call the green-haired girl, so that he would feel much better if she were there, but this was not to be. There was nothing to be done, because during the period of the pestilence there must be someone to absorb some of the essence, but they had not yet found that person, so the subordinate was very much in favor of the master's liking for the girl, although he had not yet admitted it, so he thought that the girl should be called now. The girl herself was already on her way, and she was obviously very sad and full of plans because all the people from the morning shift had suddenly been fired from their jobs, and now she had nothing to do and was thinking that the master must have left and had not even said goodbye to her. But then she thought about her behavior, and it was not at all clear why she was so worried, and it was clear that she was slowly going mad, for she should have hoped that she would never see this man again. For she must forget the incident immediately, and he must also forget his essence. She felt something like this when they were seeing each other, and it seemed that he had become really attached to her, but somehow or other the master had promised to kill her one day, and he had certainly changed a great deal since then, but still her fear did not leave her, and she thought that when he left, she should leave this place as well. The master himself was thinking that the girl only had to wait a couple of weeks and he would return, and of course she suddenly remembered these words, and she began to behave very provocatively and aroused the suspicions of one of the maids, and she called her and said that the master's subordinate wanted to see her and she should run to the estate as soon as possible. Here the girl stopped for a moment and realized that the master had not yet left, and this was very strange because just the thought of seeing him now made her body warm and gave her indescribable joy. Now she was standing in front of him, wondering what she would say to him now, but she decided that she should ask him when he would go to the capital, and now she realized that she had not changed her attitude toward him at all, and that she simply needed to know when she would have a chance to escape, so she came at last and saw her subordinate before her. Now he told her that the master was very unwell, and she was surprised because she thought he was sick and maybe he was just faking it, but it was not clear because he was just lying in his bed and in the blanket. It was clear that he was not pretending, but living his real emotions. The girl thought for a moment that they should have called the doctor instead of her, but decided to stay here, and the subordinate said he would leave them alone. So she was a little scared, but rushed to him and asked how he felt. Then our master regained a little consciousness, and when he saw the girl, he asked her why she had come. For he had not called her, but he suddenly smelled so sweet and attracted her with this smell that she wanted to hug him closer, and she could not restrain herself, but she tried very hard. She told him that she had been told that he was very sick, but he didn't want her to see him in that state, so he said that it was all nonsense, and she should just leave him. But she didn't know how to do that, because he should have obeyed her, but her body was just moving on its own, and she wanted to give him a massage. Of course, it surprised him a little bit, but she thought it was the right thing to do because he felt sick, and he didn't know what the girl meant at all, because she shouldn't have behaved like that, and he said it by grabbing her chin. The girl looked him straight in the eye and thought that even though she felt incredibly disgusted with herself, she was attracted to a man who was unwell and could not do anything about it. He just threw her down on his bed and started to lean against her, and they were crazy about each other again and couldn't stop feeling like that. And the guy didn't understand because even though he should be attracted to a real partner, he was happy with what she had now. He realized that more than that, the heat, pain, and dizziness went away when he was with this girl, and her presence really calmed him down a lot. And now he wanted to be with her as long as possible, and thus it was undeniable. The girl really felt incredible pleasure in this process, and she wanted this man to hug her much tighter, and they merged into a single stream of feeling called love, and no one could explain in words what was happening to them, because it was just chemistry between them, and they could cope with any symptoms by hugging each other. Of course, the boy began to realize that this girl was the one for him. But at the same time he rejected all these guesses and thoughts and said that she could not be the right person for him and did not even want to think about it. All the laborers who had left the mansion came back, and thus the boy watched the girl resting quietly and sleeping in his bed, and he looked at her and was very sad because he had to leave the whole place. The subordinate entered his room and saw that his condition had stabilized, so he reported to him that all the servants of the estate had returned, and there was not a single northerner among them, and it seemed that his fever had subsided, but only one who had absorbed this essence of his could remove it. Thus he suggested that perhaps this girl was the person, but the boy looked at her and told him not to continue, for he probably understood everything perfectly well and knew that the girl was somewhere near him all the time and did not know how to react to the whole situation. He really didn't know why, but he was absolutely sure that she couldn't be the one who had shared his essence with him and the one he had promised to tear his heart out, but no matter what he guessed, he never suspected her of that and thought she was just head over heels in love with him. He looked very sincerely and intently at the girl who was sleeping at that moment and knew that his essence was right inside her and pointed to her heart, and he really did not want to do anything bad to her because it was probably her he had fallen in love with. Now the next day, when she was alone, she thought about how much she had been worried because she had lost her head that day and seduced the sick master. But after that they did not see each other for a whole week, and she thought that this method of treatment had helped him. And in general, she rejected any dirty thoughts, because she realized that she had no right to desire him and kiss him and sleep in the same bed with him when he was so ill, and to the point that she was still alive, and today he finally called her to his place. If he asks very nicely, he may forgive her for what she did that night, and now she will gladly go to his room. When she went up to him and greeted him, she noticed that he did not even look at her. And she realized that it would be even better this way, and she decided to apologize for her rudeness to him, because on that day, when he was very sick and ill, she should not have behaved like that, and he continued to be silent, and this alarmed her very much. Usually he was much warmer towards her, but now his gaze was completely cold, and he told her that she should not apologize for it, and she should not apologize for anything at all, and this shocked her, and she did not know what to do and why he was saying that, and what really happened. He decided to ask her what he should do with her, and how best to deal with this situation. And the girl kept looking at him and did not understand what was happening and why he was behaving and saying such terrible things to her. The girl felt all tight inside, and she really hoped that he would forgive her, because they had slept together more than once, so he just needed to stop being angry and just accept this apology. And he did not know why he needed to do this and why he was scared. The girl saw some anger in his eyes, and she didn't understand why he was suddenly so serious, but if she asked him, it could very well lead to unwanted consequences, and she said that he had a lot of faults with her. But she was not a bad person, and she had never hurt people, so if she was at fault, it was because she didn't know. She did what she thought was right, but it is clear that she disappointed him because of her inexperience, so if he was not happy, he should understand that she simply did not know how to express her feelings for him. So the boy decided to ask the girl how he could know that she was not lying at that moment, but she could not understand why he could not just take her at her word, because they had spent so much time together, and now he had asked her if she promised to be honest with him, and she had promised. In fact, he then decided to ask her only one question, namely, where she came from, and this surprised her very much, and she was afraid. But there was nothing wrong with this question in his opinion, and he immediately demanded an honest answer from her. She immediately remembered something that she hadn't thought of before, and now she began to realize that he was looking for the criminal who was on the land, and of course he hadn't been quite sure before, but now all the workers had recently returned to the village, and she was not prepared for this. Suddenly she thought that she was in no danger at all, and now he was before her, and she began to remember that this man was the very dragon who had sworn to tear her heart out and tear her to pieces, and by touching him and being with him she had forgotten who he really was. The girl continued to be silent and did not answer the questions, but the master still expected her to say something and answer. But she tried to calm herself internally and thought that if he knew for sure that she was a night singer, he would not ask any more questions, which meant that he was still in doubt. He could have finished her off long ago, but the girl had already started to say something and began to apologize for being a little confused about the question, and said that even if she told him, he would hardly understand what the place was because it was so far away. She just decided to act naturally for her, so as not to reveal herself. Of course, this was not the answer the master expected to hear, and he was not pleased, but she did tell him the village she came from, and said that it was a small southern place, unremarkable, and nobody knew it because it was very, very far away. He seemed to believe her, and she thought it was all right, but she could not understand what he was thinking, so he decided to ask her something else, namely, whether she really loved him. The girl told him very firmly that she did, but deep down she knew that she had lied to save her life, but she continued to play the role of a girl in love with him, and he doubted that she was as sincere as she had been in answering the previous question. In fact, he said that she could go now, and now she could not get away with it, and she asked if he would punish her because he had told her to be more modest and not to fall in love with him too much. But he said that she should understand everything perfectly well. She knew, and her inner voice was telling her, that she should stop talking and just get out of here as soon as possible, but she told him anyway that she could put him to bed as before. She knew very well why she said this, because she hoped that this question would help her to get rid of her anxiety and that her master would start to treat her warmly again and everything would be as before, and this hope still remained inside her. Now she told him that he could call her any time he needed her, and with that she lowered her head, but the master could not restrain himself and just kissed her and grabbed her and told her that he did not allow her to leave his room just now. They kept kissing and hugging and couldn't stop, but the girl kept asking him if he was angry with her, but he didn't understand why she was asking, and she kept explaining that he wanted to punish her and suddenly became so cold and called her a liar, but in the end he kissed her. To be honest, she was in a kind of lost state. She was very sorry if she really did something wrong, but the master really wanted her to stop talking nonsense, because if she really made him angry, he would have killed her right there. In this case, the girl did not understand why the master was treating her like this, but he did not have an answer to this question and did not really know. On that day, she again thought that the master must never know who she really was, and she continued to support and play her role as a good and innocent girl who did not understand anything in this life. Then it is depicted how the subordinate went into his master's room and saw him sleeping in an embrace with this girl, and of course realized that he was head over heels in love with her, but would never have believed that he would decide to save her life by giving up his own essence. And in this case, as his assistant, he had to simply accept it and do nothing against his will. It was very difficult for him to accept this as true, but on the other hand, he could have dealt with this girl himself, so as soon as she woke up and saw her subordinate, she was very frightened. She began to excuse herself to him, saying that the master had said that he could not sleep, and she had only meant to wait until he fell asleep. But that was not what happened, and she did not want him to think that she had not meant for it to happen. But she was still confused and could not say anything more intelligent. When he had heard her, he told her that she could simply leave, and when his master woke up, he told him not to enter his room again without his permission, and he apologized to him, but still asked why he had decided to give up his true self. He really didn't want to explain anything to his subordinate, but he kept talking to him about how he was ready to find someone more suitable for him than that green-haired girl, if he would only order him to do so, and he would make it happen. But the master understood that the girl was the only one who was suitable for him. He went on to explain that there was no medicine in this world that could help him to cure his insomnia, and it was evident that he had not yet understood what he was feeling. He then asked when he was going to find his essence, and he replied that as soon as they had taken care of all the business in the court and the coronation ceremony would take place at the same time, and in general the boy's heart was beating very fast when he thought of the girl who had confessed her love to him, and he remembered their conversation earlier and was worried. When he woke up the next day, he realized that everything the girl had told him the day before was an absolute lie, and it was a pure and unadulterated lie, and she was tearfully confessing to him that she was in love with him, and it seemed that he had completely lost his mind and did not know why his heart was hurting so much. He suddenly began to think that he wanted her to really love him, but he pushed these thoughts away because he could not really want that, because he was probably just driven by the desire to put her in chains, and if she wanted to escape, she would not be able to leave her lover, and he would make her hold on to him as tightly as possible. And then he had an overwhelming desire to tear out her heart and regain his own essence, and it was for this reason that he had to meet with that girl immediately, and he got out of bed and realized that he had to hear her say that she loved him. When he got to the girl's house, he saw her talking to a boy and telling him that she was not ready to meet anyone, and our master was standing in the bushes watching attentively. The guy continued to convince the girl that maybe she would think about it, but if she still refused, he would never bother her again, and he confessed his love for her, and when the owner heard this, he became incredibly aggressive. Deep within the master, anger grew, and he knew that he would not stand by, and that no matter what might happen, even if the whole world were to burn in flames, he would not allow these two to be together. Suddenly the girl saw the master standing between them and did not know what he was doing, but the master could not realize what he was doing because he was so angry that he lost control of himself. He asked the girl what she was doing here, but she was actually the one who lived here, and she should have asked him what he was doing here, and for some reason he felt very, very bad that he was about to go completely mad, because when he saw another boy confess his love to her, it was as if a demon had entered him. Love was a sign of the weak, and a strong and stately man like him had no interest in such nonsense, but he seemed to have just felt hatred for his love and disgust at the scene, and he had to say something immediately, lest he lose his status in her eyes. He told the girl that she had asked him about the punishment earlier, and now she was a little scared because he had come to tell her about it and started laughing, but he wondered why she was so happy, and this behavior was completely unacceptable to her. Then the guy who was standing next to the girl greeted him and introduced himself to him and asked him what he had to do with the girl, and he remembered that the guy was next to him and showed even more unwanted hostility towards him. He thought that the girl had already finished her conversation with this person, and he smiled at her face, but he saw her look at her friend, and he was very angry that she allowed herself to look at someone else when he smiled at her, and he became even more angry at that guy and wanted to finish him off. Now the girl decided that it was time to say goodbye to the boy and told him that they should talk a little later and see him tomorrow, so he left, and the master told him that he would punish the girl every night. So he should not come here at that time because his punishment would be very long because he was very angry. Now they went to the house of the athlete girl, who did not understand what was happening because she thought she would die of shame when the boy told her he loved her, and now the master came. He decided to ask the girl if he was her friend or boyfriend, but she told him that he had sperm toxicosis in the last stage, and that he would first make her a baby, and then make her work, and moreover, he would probably cheat on her, and she was not going to meet them. But the girl began to explain to him that this was not true at all, as she perceived him only as a friend and nothing more, and now that he told her about his feelings, she did not know how to behave, because no one had ever confessed his love to her before, and she added that she loved only him very much. The girl actually said this out loud, and he did not want to hear anything about it, because he also added that he did not want her to be his friend or date him, because it would not make any sense anyway, and he really did not care about others, but his person should not associate with such miserable people. The fact that the master called her his person surprised her very much, and she did not hear it, because he really considered her special, and thus he confirmed only this thought, but said that she was an exception to the rule, because usually he did not care about others at all, and now she must love him. The girl could not understand anything at all, because he forbade her to love other people, but allowed her to love herself, and did the master suspect her of anything. But she did not want this living embodiment of narcissism to really love her. She was very well aware that if she stuttered about anything, he could kill her immediately, and in that case he had already decided to start punishing her and begin the whole process for which he had come to see her. The girl began to justify herself to him, saying that she was a very fragile girl, and if he hit her too hard, she would no longer be able to give him massages, and she was certainly not asking for herself in this case, but was trying for his sake, because she really did not want things to turn out this way. But he said that he wasn't going to hit her at all, which meant to her that maybe he was going to reduce her salary because she was already small, but he didn't mean it at all, because it was just a girl being punished in this way, and she didn't know any other punishment than this. So she really wanted him to let her go just like that, because she was not so guilty before him. But the boy confessed to her that he was no longer angry with her for daring to love him, and then it was not clear what he wanted from her, but he kissed her and said that he had to punish her for seducing him when he was sick. But the girl was very surprised by this, because he himself told her that everything was fine, and it seems that it happened more than once, but the girl did not remember anything like that, and he decided to remind her of all these incidents and continued to kiss her. And after that he became like a cat that got to the cream and constantly began to punish her like that, and then something happened. What happened was that one day the girl suddenly became ashamed and saw that a certain aristocrat caught them in the act, and this time he said that he had a wonderful gift for him, and it was so terrible, but our master just finished him off because he had crept up on him like a rat. But it was his own fault, because he had to do it in a public place, and he just put him down with a few snaps of his fingers, but I think he didn't kill him yet, and the man was just sleeping. Then the master confessed to the girl that he actually had magic, and the girl actually knew all this for a long time, because everyone knew, but she did not know it, and thus she did not quite understand him. But this phrase aroused her suspicions. But such trifles tend to fade from the memory in the course of time, and she soon forgot all about it, so that after some time had passed she noticed the heat was subsiding, and she saw the gentleman carrying her box again. She didn't know what he was doing, because he was carrying a box of potatoes, and maybe he had just caught sunstroke or was hallucinating. But he really wanted to help her, and the strangeness of his behavior did not end there. The girl continued to work, and she was thinking that everyone was so busy harvesting that they didn't even have time to have lunch, and she decided to bring something to eat for everyone, and then her friend grabbed her and offered her his help. She quickly refused him because she could manage on her own, because usually she was very happy to see him, but after that confession she was very uncomfortable being around him, but he still insisted on helping her, and he could carry everything himself. Their sweet conversation was interrupted by our master, saying that he had long wanted to try to bring food to someone, so he ordered the girl to show him the way, but she thought she could get there much faster on her own. Just in that case, if he brings them the basket himself, they will think that he can be given some small errands, and as if he was on the lookout for a girl to help him, his reputation will not be damaged and everyone will be in a favorable position. Instead, he just chased her friend away and told him to get out of here immediately. But he had to go there too, but he said that he should go the other way, and from that evening the owner treated him very strangely, which the girl did not understand what it was about. He really changed a lot, and the girl was very suspicious of him, and even had thoughts that the owner liked her friend, because as soon as he wanted to help them, he appeared out of nowhere and snatched the basket from her hands and chased him away as if he didn't want him to do such dirty work. Perhaps he did not want to see the boy suffer, because the last time they had sorted out the gifts from the nobility, he had told her to take a lot of men's clothes, although she had no use for them, and it appears that he wanted her to give them to a friend of hers, and the Lord himself was not going to give him such a gift personally. Moreover, at that time he just continued to behave like that, and she just drowned in these delusional illusions, and when she imagined them together, she was very hurt and probably just shocked that the master could love someone very truly. When the master began to distribute the food to all the servants, he called the girl over and asked her if he was doing the right thing, but it was strange to her, because she had spent much more time with the master than her friend, and it would have been more logical if he had fallen in love with her, but perhaps she thought that she had overplayed her hand with the love game and was simply bored with him. She was really confused and did not understand anything. But still, when she was in the room with them, she looked at him very strangely, and he naturally caught her looking at him and asked her what was wrong. The girl thought it was a very appropriate question, because the last time he had said that love was a complete nonsense, and he had used it to get close to his lover, and she said that she was thinking about what he had said to her recently. Namely, she reminded him that he had said that love was meaningless and a useless feeling, and that his love was also useless, but he told her that he loved no one, and then she realized that he was lying and wanted to hear the truth from him because she had already understood everything, but he did not understand what she meant and what she wanted to hear from him. When she explained to him that he had fallen in love with a friend of hers, he denied it, of course, but she thought that this only proved that it was true, that she must not be so stupid as not to notice it, and that was how his attitude had changed, because she never left his side. When he heard this nonsense from her, he was very interested in what was going on in her mind. But she was also very interested in knowing the same thing, and even if that was the case, he did not understand what difference it made to her, for did she want to take possession of his soul as well as his body? When he spoke in such a sweet voice, she wanted to strangle him, but perhaps it was also true, and in that case he told her to stop talking about her friend and to talk about him. And thus he did not want to hear such nonsense from her, for she knew him very well, and thus she could see that he was not lying. Actually, she continued to explain to him that her friend was not suitable for a relationship, and that everyone liked him, and that he was always being hit on, and finally he heard her say something reasonable, and yet he really did not like him, and since she loved him, she should believe him. But he told her that maybe he was wrong, but she convinced him that she still liked him. But he had great doubts, and he felt sorry that he could not tear out her heart and check it to see if it was true. But she had a weak heart since childhood. Even if he did tear it out, it would do him no good, and when the girl behaved like that, he wanted to break something.